The Supreme Court's decision to overturn the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision this past June was both shocking and frustrating for millions of Americans. In one ruling, a major pillar in reproductive rights was all but totally stripped away. Now more than ever, it's crystal clear there is a faction of Americans interested in enforcing strict, regressive policies throughout our nation. On this episode, we're diving deep into what the Supreme Court's recent decision really means and the impact this decision will have on reproductive rights today. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Keiko Talks. Tonight we got, I don't even want to call it controversial. It's much more just frustrating, I guess, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. But we got a big topic that we're discussing tonight. And if you read the title, you know that we're discussing Roe versus Wade, which was recently overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court in late June, I think around like June 26th or so. The conservative majority who sits on the bench currently decided to overturn a decision which was made in 1973, Roe versus Wade, which is a huge, something they discuss in all like U.S. history classes, basically, which was a huge decision made at the time to grant basically abortion rights before the first trimester in a woman's pregnancy. And that was made constitutional law pretty much. So yeah, we're discussing that today because it was recently overturned. And as we know, there has been a major conservative backlash in the last few years following a certain someone's presidency. And this is it just feels like this is one additional step in trying to really dial back the clock and just really get to some really regressive, really problematic policies, like return to that. You know, it's very reactionary politics, like people really trying to take it back to like the 1800s kind of thing. So yeah, we're gonna be discussing that in depth today because we felt like it was just, there's so much public outrage surrounding it. I mean, and even personal just outrage around it. So we want to have a really good conversation because there is so much information out there about Roe versus Wade and what's going to happen, you know, given the Supreme Court's overturning and people definitely are fearful now of, you know, reproducing. So, we want to get into that conversation. Like, what do you think, Caitlin? Just about in general about what happened.
I think it's just kind of like a step backwards in this country, especially for like women's rights, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
However, I cannot say I'm surprised, especially with our government and politicians that we have in place currently. I think a lot of people are trying to be citizens, I'll say, are trying to be progressive while you have these individuals who are older with a old school mindset and position when it comes to the overarching policies, I guess you could say, for America. And so you're allowing those individuals to decide what happens for the future of our company or of our country when their future is not much longer in this country, right? So
I love that.
You know, it is true though. Like, you know, you may have another, according to logistics and the life expectancies of individuals in America, their life expectancy is, you know, not much longer. Whereas, you know, I have 50, 60 years to live. And so you're making decisions for me when you have, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years. Like, okay, all right. Well, you know, you don't have to live through this.
Half of them on the bench got 1 foot
out the door.
And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can barely walk.
I love that.
You know how to search the internet. So, you know.
You can put that on the top of this episode in the title, Making Decisions for the Country When You Don't Have Much Longer to Live in the Country. I love it. But like, honestly, that's how our politics have worked is like, we have people, I mean, even Joe Biden is like 80 something. Like these incredibly older people which don't get me wrong, they have earned their stripes, they have lived long enough, but like you can't tell me that Joe Biden is sitting up in there really understanding what a 25-year-old young black woman is going through. Can't nobody tell
Oh,
me he
100%.
understands that. We on two different life levels. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then let alone the like conservative older gentleman on the Supreme Court bench. Like at least Joe Biden has the is a part of the party and has the group of people around him like at least telling him like this is what might be a black a young black woman's demographic or like interest. The people on the bench don't have any of that, not even an iota of that. So like it's concerning, you know.
100%.
Yeah. But before we get into this discussion, as we always like to do, let's give some background information. Let's get the facts straight, and then we can discuss what we think is going to happen. Uh, just moving forward, because that's really that's what we should be. That's really the concern now. Is just what does this mean for our futures? You know what I mean? Especially as women, young women. So just a little bit of background on the actual case of Roe versus Wade, because I don't think people really clearly understand what Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court case, really did and was. So as we noted, it's a landmark decision case. So this was a major decision case, and it has continued to exist throughout the land for about 50 years now, right? So coming up in 2023, it would be 50 years. So basically what happened was in 1973, a woman, they call her Jane Roe, but that's a fictional name used for court documents to protect the identity of the woman. She filed a lawsuit against Henry Wade, who was the district attorney of Dallas, Texas, Dallas County in Texas, where she lived. And she was challenging basically a Texas law which made abortion illegal, except by doctor's orders. So she was, or to save a woman's life. So she was challenging that ruling that you could only have an abortion. You couldn't have an abortion basically by choice. That's what she was challenging. Because abortion, I guess, was legal at the time only to save a woman's life if a doctor ordered it. So in her lawsuit, she alleged that the state laws were unconstitutionally vague and that it abridged of her right of personal privacy protected by the First, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendment. So she wanted not only have her right to privacy, but her like right to basically make that decision for herself personally, not have the government come in and say, you cannot, it is illegal to have said abortion because we recognize life at a certain time and you have, quote, expelled life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the time I think this court case started out in like 1967, but obviously they didn't make their decision until 1973. That's how long these things really go on, right? So the Supreme Court decided in 1973 that it would actually allow the state to regulate abortions only after the second trimester. So the first trimester, that was the individual's right to decide what she was or was not going to do with the baby, the child, whatever, her own body, her own choice, right? Which is why there's so much now about like at least allowing up to the first trimester, which is the first 3 months of a pregnancy, you know. So I think that's the part people don't understand. I think they think Roe versus Wade was just total like all abortion legal at any time, but what it really is saying is second trimester the state can intervene. First trimester they don't have a right to intervene. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which at least gives the woman 3 months of decision making time. Right.
Yeah, and that's the abortions that we know of, anyways, within the first three months.
Yeah. Which is
Whether you
typically
like a medical,
yeah.
Whether that's like from you may know that through medical education or through legal stance, but I want to say that decision was rooted in some sort of medical decision as well.
Yeah, because I think at the time before first trimester it's still considered the safest option for an abortion is before the fetus develops to a certain point, which is before the second trimester. So I think second trimester is probably when they were like medically, this is when the state can get involved, and then before then it's a woman's choice or it's an individual's choice. I'm going to just say women.
I think in the first trimester too, typically the fetus is more of like a bunch of cells. And so it's also an easier extraction, I want to say as well. or it doesn't cause for like necessarily an invasive procedure.
Yeah. And I'm looking up on, if you guys don't know what oye.org is, it's basically I think it's privately owned, but it gives summaries of all the Supreme Court documents basically and decisions and everything, even from like way, way back in the day. So if you want to know anything about Supreme Court decision, oye.org, and it's oyez.org. They keep up with everything. And they
We'll
put
put
it
it in the description too.
Yeah. But what they ruled for for Roe versus Wade in 1973, the original, is under the 14th Amendment that under the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, it protects against the state's action the right to privacy. So a woman has a right to privacy under the 14th Amendment, basically. So that's kind of how they came up with that idea, or not I came up with, but they ruled that according to the Constitution, she has this constitutional right to privacy. So the state cannot just intervene, which was the sweeping law of the land, or legal precedent that was set, right, for the entire country. So all states were following under that idea of the state can't intervene before the first trimester, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So a state law that would just widely prohibit, abortion. So a state law that was like, you cannot have an abortion at all would be against the law under Roe versus Wade, basically. Yeah. So, under Roe versus Wade. But that's what makes this issue of them overturning it so problematic, is because now you're allowing a state to come in and say, we can totally just, there would be no right to a privacy. A woman would not have a right to privacy at all. So first trimester is gone.
Facts. Or the right to decide what happens with her body.
Yeah, because then the state would be technically what they call it as the state having an interest in potential human life. So the state would have an interest, I guess, in like this fetus becoming a child. So they would have an interest in the fetus and therefore the life.
You need to raise said fetus.
But and obviously that gets into a giant debate, because we really do get into the ethics of it all, and then what are the ethics of an unborn life and then an actual life here on Earth? You know what I mean?
What defines an actual life?
Exactly.
Because they keep referring to said child as this baby or this child, right? As long as it's in the body of a mother, that it's called a fetus, right? First of all. And regardless of how you want to look at that, without mom, there is no fetus.
Yeah.
Period. And so how can you tell a mom what to do with something that is technically a parasite inside of her?
Yeah.
That is something feeding off of her. If she was not alive or something happened to mom, then you have no baby. You have not even a baby. You have no fetus, because it's not a baby until it's born, and until after a couple months, then it becomes a baby, an infant.
Yeah. I just think
For a while, it's a needle first, and then it becomes whatever in gestation. But there's a huge distinction.
Yeah.
People are just like skipping over.
Exactly. And that's why this case came up in the 70s. Keyword, it's also important to note this issue has been around for a long time. So this issue is coming up. They were having these questions in late 60s, 70s, right? That's also a time of when more sexual liberation was coming into play, right? Like hookup culture really came about in that kind of counterculture, I don't want to say just hippie, but like the F the establishment type culture. That's when hookup culture came about, right? So like there's already people starting to kind of not follow these like strict courting, dating, sexual liberation rules, right? And then you get into the state having to ask questions of like, where does the state's interest, or where does the state protect the quote unborn life, And I just think it's interesting that they're not questioning this from a woman's right to choose perspective so much. They're questioning this from a, where does the state's interest lie?
What always gets me about this is,
that's weird. It's
if that's your question, where does the state interest lie as far as a fetus is concerned, right? Of this unborn fetus. Then why are you interested in the living being?
I agree with that too. That's what I'm
AKA
saying.
like this
It
mother
can be
who
both.
is, AKA this mother who may need an abortion or who just simply wants one. Why is your interest not in those who are living?
Exactly.
In order to continue to procreate, you must have living beings who are able to take care of said beings that are procreated, let alone themselves.
Yes.
So it's like it baffles me on if that's your main interest. You have to first take care. It's just kind of like you cannot offer something to someone else that you cannot offer to yourself first, right? If you are not taken care of, then what can you offer to anything else? Same
Exactly.
principle. Same principle. So odd to me.
Exactly.
Very odd to me.
It's, this is such an interesting debate, not even just because of what recently happened, and that was inflammatory in itself. We could have a whole podcast on just why that happened, why it was
Mhm.
overturned. But this raises so many questions on ethics, on how where not just where we consider life, but like how are we treating life once once it's here? What are we defining as life? What about the mother's life? Are we considering the father in this? Who like this is like this is so layered to me,
Oh yeah, for
And that's
sure.
why I think when they
100%.
just outright ban, you're really not looking at the layers.
At
There's so
all.
many
But I mean,
layers.
look who's making these decisions. There was not a single
Yeah.
woman. Was there? I think was
No,
it
there was
one
one
maybe?
woman. Somebody, I
One.
saw something. It was funny. It was like the people who made a decision, none of them are fertile. And there was a woman on
Exactly.
there, but like she's like in her like 50s, if not probably closer to
Yeah.
60s. But that's so true. It's like, why is the people making this unable to conceive or have a child?
Does anyone know if she voted for or against this?
I think she was put in by Trump, I believe. So I would imagine
Mm,
she voted for.
got it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
So, and I want to say she's Catholic or something. I think now don't quote me on that because she could be.
And that's another thing I don't understand is, during the founding days of America, right?
Mhm.
There was a huge, I would say, emphasis on separating church from state, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel like a lot of people, not a people, the Supreme Court justices, as you will, um, were not looking at this unbiasedly. It was just like, well, here's what I think because this is my religious belief kind of thing. Because why else would you vote for it to stay other than your religious beliefs? For the life of me, most people who say that is rooted in some type of religion. Well, God said, all life matters. Uh, you know, well, but if you look at it unbiasedly, first of all, from an unbiased standpoint, what you do with your body and in your home is your business, period, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, that stands. Um, unless I guess you're just nosy and you're just like, well, I need to know what's going on in your body. You know what I mean? Okay. The only other thing would be because of your religious beliefs that you just don't agree with it religiously. Or why else would you care?
I don't know. I
Which,
think it also just is. It's just like they try to like. I think that like they like get off on like returning to like old values, and I'm like, what is the old value? The old
yeah.
value was restrictive.
But I mean, I think that's interesting that a lot of the Supreme Court justices agree on that. But it's older Republican, if you will, or want to be Republican individuals deciding this for women, for example, it's
Mhm.
old men who
Yeah.
have benefited from said,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
I
Most
guess you could
definitely.
say
But
advances.
oh yeah. And here's the thing, and this is what we all know. Statistics, people know this. This is not unknown. Like some of the most sexually deviant people in America are conservative
Oh,
people.
for sure.
Like like strippers will tell you it is older middle-aged men who is
Yep.
that demographic for conservative men, for conservative people
Oh
who
yeah.
purchase their services the most, who like go
Exactly.
to these sex hotlines like the most. So their interest, they're like trying to restrict somebody's like reproductive rights while also continuing to pour into more sexually, charged or sexually deviant like activities and industries.
Yeah.
And
And be
make
the main one pushing an abortion on somebody when you have a whole wife at home, but you
yeah,
got, whatever on the
all of them
side.
on their wives. I'm like,
It
the
is
most
odd to me.
ridiculous people I've ever been around have been conservative
Mm-hmm.
men. Like most just like outwardly like trying to get with people knowing they're married, that kind of stuff. That yeah, conservative Trump
Yep.
supporting type people.
Mm-hmm.
But the first to be like women shouldn't have an abortion.
Yep.
But you trying to
But you've already paid for somebody to have an abortion. You can't tell me your little niece Bethany hasn't had one, or
exactly.
you haven't sent your side piece to have one either. So
Or
it's
your
crazy
wife
to
has
me.
had one. Like
Or your wife, yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like these things, abortions come about in so many different ways. It's not just some like reckless, like trying to clean up a reckless act. It's not that. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
strictly that. And even if you wanted it to clean up a reckless act, you should have the option to do that. That's what they're saying is you
Exactly.
should have the option. It's not about trying to make people just like have abortions. It's having the option to, if you
Exactly.
so desire to have said option. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's always wild to me too because I'm like, they always, especially when it comes to wearing masks, they didn't want to be restricted wearing a mask.
Or forced
Like,
to have the vaccine.
they're forced to have a vaccine, but can't understand choice when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't
There's
make
this
any
chick that
sense.
I follow. It's like this guy who goes around asking people, um, I guess specifically conservative individuals, their take on like Roe versus Wade and just like different things like guns and different like random restrictive things for men. And it's so interesting to see how people can like a lot of people, there's some women on there too, but how a lot of the men would be like, yeah, it's hypocritical. I wouldn't want nobody to take my rights away as a man. Um, because one of the things he was talking about was he was like, so you think there should be laws to like stop people from masturbating? He was like, well, I don't know how you would do that. I just don't understand, and like laughed about it. But and then he the next question was like, but you support Roe versus Wade? And he's like, yeah, I don't think you should have an abortion. So I'm confused here.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's a hypocritical, you know?
Absolutely hypocritical because
Yeah.
these are all aimed at restricting women so that men do not have the. It's like enforcing patriarchy again. It's
Oh, for sure.
making sure that women are always held responsible for any sort of sexual act. They're always held responsible while the male in the situation, speaking heterosexually here, while the male in the situation is absolved of all responsibility because these rights don't
Mm-hmm.
restrict anything. I would actually almost have respect for this more seriously if this included some clause in there, something in there that restricted a male's who impregnates, if it restricted their behavior. This stuff is not restricting any of that.
Oh,
So
at all. Mm-hmm.
the this is totally a patriarchal control power move. It's all about like
Mm-hmm.
making sure women like don't have access to a choice for themselves,
For sure.
right?
For sure. Yeah. No, I definitely think like first of all, I mean, me personally, I think the American government system is somewhat of a joke at this point anyway, but this really went on to be like,
Yeah,
okay, there needs to be some serious reevaluation here.
exactly.
Um, however, if they were going to overturn, which they ended up doing anyway, um, they needed to me clarify a lot of things like what is a fetus, what is not a fetus, that needed to be clarified, which you cannot clarify if you are not a medical professional, which
Mhm.
they did not get um, any type of
Medical
education
potential.
or validation in their decision from any medical professional, let alone women. Okay.
Mhm.
So, okay, that opinion's
We
trash.
can even ask men. A lot of men agree with, are infuriated by Roe versus Wade too.
Oh, yeah. I've seen
Because
that.
actually, women
To me,
having access to abortion allows for more hookup culture to exist, which
oh, yeah,
benefits men.
exactly.
Patriarchy. I don't
Yeah,
understand. I'm like, this does nothing for even you, actually.
for sure. Yeah, I've seen this thing. Also, it was saying how the vasectomy rates have gone up. It was like an article I was reading,
Mm-hmm.
which good for men for supporting women in that, because without I think the collective, this is going to be this is just going to be very challenging to like
Mm-hmm.
once again trying to get rights for women again. Like we've
Yeah.
already been through this hurdle, and now it's just like again, like come on, bro.
Yeah. I've heard some
Um,
here, and this was really disheartening. They were like, "Why are we in 2022? I have less rights than my mom did in 1980."
exactly,
And that's really
exactly.
the truth. Like we like as we like continue on this like conservative backlash, like we are not even living in the same world freedom wise as our mothers, as our fathers.
Hmm.
Like, they had more. Like it was easier for my mom to go get an abortion in the state of South Carolina than it probably is for us. Would have
Oh,
been
for
for
sure. Yeah, we couldn't get one in South Carolina. We just
yeah,
couldn't. You had to travel to another state, God knows where. Let alone affordability. Like, who has the money to travel
yeah.
to do that? You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, which is
It's
odd
so
enough.
disheartening. I
Oh,
mean,
it
not that
is.
parents could have controlled this situation, but it's like if I were a parent looking at this outlook, I'd be like, I would feel like I don't know what to tell my children because the children are supposed to be the future, and this is the past. This is
Oh, for
regressive,
sure.
you know?
For sure. I definitely think too that like for me, like okay, growing up, I never wanted kids, but then I was like, oh, maybe I do want like a little Caitlyn run around. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
like I've been considering like the idea. I guess like over the past few years or whatever. Like some days I'm a down, the other days I'm like absolutely not. Um, but this, I'm just like, this is disheartening. Like, do you really want to bring a child into this world knowing where this world is going? And this
Yeah,
is not, to me, this is just like the tip of the iceberg.
yeah,
Especially with the politicians that are currently in office. I don't really think there's a difference between Republican and Democrats at this point. Like they're all one and the same. They have one mission, capitalism. That's their mission,
yeah.
in saving the greater race.
Hmm.
Well, what they call the greater race, but I mean, in diminishing women's power because
Yeah. Keeping patriarchy
historically,
intact.
yeah, historically that benefits capitalism. Um,
Well, actually, no.
so
What actually benefits is having a bigger workforce, which is would have more women in there. Correct, right?
yeah, they don't want women to be independent. They want women to serve their purpose,
And what
and keeping
makes
them dumb and educated and without rights, and with child makes them continue to be in the workforce.
yeah, and I think, and speaking of what Caitlin was saying, just tying this back to capitalism, this has economic effects too, right?
Hmm.
So when women are allowed, when abortion is an option, women can do what? That frees up their ability to go get educated, to work jobs, to continue on with life, contribute to the economy. Not having that access, if you're 22, you have something happens, you have a child. Now you're raising a child. You're either dependent on, you can try to work for yourself. You might not be able to get educated to get the education that gives you more job opportunities. So you might be dependent on a man or who the child's father, you know what I mean? Or the government or whatever, right? So like these things don't actually necessarily benefit the economy. Like, you know what I'm
I mean, I
saying?
wouldn't
I
say
mean, a man
so,
was
but
talking about women being leeches or like people on government assistance and like women using men or whatever. And it's like y'all are setting this. You want this to go back to total patriarchy where men actually had to be responsible. Under a
mhm,
patriarchy, it puts a man at the head, right? So they have to actually be responsible for things. But you don't want responsibility. What is
exactly. I mean, here's what I don't understand with this:
it?
with Roe versus Wade in as a law, right before it was overturned, men
Mhm.
didn't want to take responsibility for the children they had then. So you
Exactly.
really think they're going to want to take responsibility now that women are not allowed to get an abortion?
Exactly. That's
I
why
mean,
I'm like,
I mean, that doesn't change anything.
to me, if anybody should be marching first in line for Roe versus Wade, is all the heterosexual men. All of them.
Yep,
Everyone who participates in hookup culture, y'all need to be front of the line because you cannot
exactly.
be asking any woman to sleep with you casually unless you're prepared to be a father. And if you're not prepared to be a father, then you should
Then
support
don't do it.
legislation like Roe versus Wade, which protects somebody's right to choose, which would absolve you of responsibility.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Which
this
is what
doesn't
you
make
want anyway.
sense to
Like,
me. I'm like, if anybody should be marching, it
it's
should be
y'all.
Jake. It should be Jake and Chandler right up there at the front. You know what I mean? Like, it kills me because I'm like, either that or we can get rid of hookup culture. Which one you want?
Doubt it. No,
That's
that's not
what I'm
gonna
saying.
happen.
Jake and Chandler don't want to get
I
rid
think
of
it also creates an environment where men think they can just do whatever to women as well.
Yeah, but that's what's effed up is like you're taking away someone's right to choose. With the right that choosing an abortion is a difficult decision to make. Period. That's not an easy decision to make. So you're acting like someone's just like, oh, gonna have orange juice today. Let me go get an abortion. It's not like that simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, at all.
It's an actual
I
life.
don't think anybody wants to have that choice. Like nobody wants to go through that experience and be like, "Oh, I had an abortion." Like that is not bragging rights by any means. I think
Most
regardless
people,
of the fact of how you get to the decision of choosing it, it's a difficult decision regardless. Like it's not a decision anybody wants to make. Period.
and the thing is, people don't realize most women get the decision they get to have an abortion is usually traumatic. A lot of times
Oh
it's
yeah.
or it's something like, oh wait, I didn't really like want to be this person, but this happened. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times you come to it either even in like medical reasons, like ectopic pregnancies and birth defects. A lot of that stuff is trauma. That's how they get to that decision to actually physically abort the fetus. It's not just some like flippant thing. Like I think they think it's like, oh, I'm just trying to cover up a reckless activity, and it's not. I mean, I think from the male perspective, it seems as this like reckless thing, but it's really a serious decision.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
That a lot of men don't even take part of, you know what I mean? Or they're like forcing that upon said woman because they don't want to have the responsibility. And so, I feel like a lot of times women are left alone in that decision as well.
Exactly.
So, how you? And with that being said, you are not about to force any guy to take responsibility for that.
Exactly. This is what I say to it. If you're gonna force, people to have children and get rid of this protection for the first trimester, I think what needs to couple that is as strict, if not more strict, limitations on male sexual behavior. That needs to get regulated too. Like, why are there no laws on the books regulating male sexuality, sexual behavior? You know what I mean?
I agree. I also think too that like if we're gonna go ahead and be like, oh, this baby has rights and this baby's gonna dictate mom's life, then dad needs to be just on the block as mom.
Yeah.
So that baby needs to go ahead and get a social security number. Y'all need to go ahead and run that mom some child support, some food stamps, some health insurance. And I'm not talking about just any health insurance through her employer. I'm talking about universal health insurance where it's on the freaking government. Y'all need to go ahead and give her a stipend for some good old child care. Y'all need to go ahead and give her some good old stipends for all the medical needs she needs to take care of. Go ahead and give her, slap her, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to call them some stimulus checks or whatever. Because, I mean, what you don't understand is that beyond this baby being inside of you, that is an emotional, physical, mental bearing that you have to carry, not only, for 9 months, but then you are expected to take care of said child.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So that's a lifetime. That ain't that don't stop at 18 years.
And a lot of men don't even participate in the rearing of the child beyond contributing financially. Even in marriage situations.
To get the baby inside mom. Most of them, for some of them, it stops there, period.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Which they don't even think about it as getting a baby. They think about it as getting off. So it's
exactly.
all their perspective. And I just feel like, we need, if we're going to have these strict, things for women or whatever, we just need to make sure that male behavior is as restricted.
Yeah. No, men need to be on the chopping block too. And I think they need to feel the effects of this decision as well. It should not just be a woman's problem because it takes more than a woman to get in that predicament in the first place. And while I think
they can't do it alone.
Exactly. So, I mean, they need to be on the chopping block as well. There's no way. Just like, they say, you have an abortion, then you're considered.
If they want to take it back to the Middle Ages. We need to have you can't call on if you want to date somebody, you call ask dad and you sit in the parlor, supervise dates. There will be no touching. There will
Yes.
be no like looking too long in somebody's direction. None of that. Supervised dates. I don't care what age you are. All of it needs to be
No, I agree
supervised.
with that. No, I agree with that. I think that's only fair.
Exactly.
That's
If
only fair.
no sexual comments towards women on the street, no catcalling at work,
Yes.
no, anybody
Sexual.
reports, yeah, nothing remotely, anything that could
Yeah.
lead to an impregnation needs to stop right there because at that point you're an accomplice to a crime. That's what I
Yes.
think.
It's also mind-boggling to me that okay, so with this Roe versus Wade, now if you have an abortion, it's considered murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you get more time for having an abortion, for possibly saving your own life by not having said child, than you do, sexually assaulting or
Mm-hmm.
the R wording someone. Um, that is mind blowing to me.
Yep.
That is
That's why
mind
I just
blowing
think
to me.
if to me, you're gonna restrict women. I
Yeah,
want all men to be or heterosexually speaking here, people who are interested in sleeping with women, their actions need to be uh restricted as well because
for sure.
the male culture all lends itself to the R word. A lot of it lends itself to these situations where women find themselves needing an abortion.
No, for sure.
Well, let me clarify. I
For
don't want to
sure.
say all male interactions lead to the R word. I'm not saying that. I don't want anybody to misconstrue. I'm not saying that. Okay, but I'm saying that the way that male men pursue women oftentimes is predatory, right? And it often is this sort of let me catch you, let me get you, you know what I mean, sort of thing to serve whatever pleasure or whatever they're looking for. So if that's what's happening, like on the male end, we need to hold them responsible for their behavior if something does come up where an abortion will be desired or
Need.
needed.
Yeah. They should be on the chopping block for murder as well.
Yeah, that's what I think too. And they should get if a woman goes down for abortion, the person who impregnated needs to go down too, just as much
100%.
time.
Yeah,
Like
I agree with that.
I feel like if society got to that level of strictness, they would reinstate it immediately. I don't think
No, for sure.
anything that
If
would,
it came to holding a man responsible,
yeah. Because the thing is, a lot of them would be in jail right now. A lot
mhm,
of them. I'm like, I can think of a couple right now, just off rip, who, if something was instated as strict as Roe versus Wade against men, you gotta go, buddy. You would be serving some time. Like, and I just think they don't want to take. Then that's what patriarchy is making sure that men stay in a position of power and privilege, even over
yeah,
something like sexuality,
mhm,
right? So,
yeah,
yeah. But anyway, so we actually want to list. We want to get more into some of the statistics of abortion as well because there's a lot of misinformation out there about who actually gets abortions. Right? Like we're saying, people think it's this reckless thing, and it's just like people who are reckless getting abortions. But some facts about abortion is women in their 20s account for about half of abortions nationwide. So women ages 24 and then 20 to 24 and then 25 to 29 have the highest amounts of abortions, while women less than 15 and over 40 have the lowest percentages of abortions. And abortions have actually been decreasing. I want to say since 2019, they were saying that like legal abortions now, this is because this is coming from the CDC, legal abortions have been decreasing. From 2010 to 2019, the total number have been decreasing by like 18%. So people were actually having less abortions, oddly enough. So like, I don't know why this legislation had to just suddenly come up, but yeah. So those are interesting statistics, as well as like mainly low income women and women. There's less than 4% under the age of 18 who actually do get abortions. Although I legal abortions. Now I do think the under 18 thing might be higher, but I think it's because they either might not be getting legal abortions or they don't report it at that age.
Well, it's all kind of like reported, like through the CDC.
Yeah.
'Cause I
That's why I'm
think
saying
as
I'm
a
not sure if
medical
that's reported.
professional, like whoever's performing it, like the doctor has to report that. There's certain things you have to report.
Mhm.
But what I will say is, I yeah, with being that they're under 18, it's parents what parents say go kind of thing,
Yeah.
and
Like, parents
so
are gonna be signed off on that.
yeah, yeah,
So I could see that getting potentially, like,
yeah.
that data being a little skewed. Not saying
Hmm.
that, like,
Hmm.
this could be totally accurate. I don't know. I'm not saying that, like, you know, all 17-year-olds or whatever are having babies. Because I actually heard the teen pregnancy rate is actually declining too.
And
And
also too, though, I think with the help of education as well as if you're not getting educated, then I guess maybe social media. I don't know.
yeah,
Um, but also you have like Plan Bs and stuff like that you can get from the store over the counter.
yeah,
So
like,
that's an easy accessible thing for children who are living under the homes of their parents, and so they just get the money and do that. That's obviously probably not going to be reported. So
yeah, that too. Yeah. And maybe that's part of it too, is like you said, those emergency contraceptives are a little bit probably more available um versus just strictly an abortion. You know what I mean?
hmm
So I just think it's interesting that, like, we were talking about earlier, like the demographic of the women who mostly get abortions are women in their 20s, like 20, 24, 25, 29, so women in their 20s, which is a time in your life which is categorized by being most sexually liberated, right? Like, a lot of times you're living on your own, so you're like in relationships and stuff, and so you do, I guess, tend to have, not me, but like tend to have more casual like hookups and stuff like that. But in your 20s. But what's interesting to me is what is the, if you're removing Roe versus Wade and it's mainly affecting 20-year-old, women in their 20s, what is the emphasis on making a 20-something-year-old woman have a child?
hmm
Like, what is that emphasis? And all I can think is, again, a power control move, because your 20s is when you're like really starting out life, trying to figure things out. That's when you're probably going to school, when you're actually getting your first jobs and doing all these things, and maybe moving and living life. All I can think is, if you want to like lock women down to children at that age, you're just trying to prevent their future. You're trying to like cut off their future. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's weird to me.
I mean, I think it's odd too. You know what I would like to know though? I would like to know, I guess, like racially, who's more
Mhm.
inclined to have an abortion. I
Yeah.
guess, I guess legally, because that's what would be reported to the CDC. But
Yeah.
I mean, like in my personal opinion, um, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, that does not take away people getting abortions by any means. People are just going to have them illegally and unsafe. Um, they're just going to have unsafe procedures, for
Hmm.
one. And for two, your individuals who have money and can pay said doctors to have legal ones are
Hmm.
just still going to have those. So, it doesn't take away abortion by any means. It just takes the legal aspect of abortion away. Um,
Hmm.
and it just creates a black market, really, for abortions. Unfortunately, you're still granting those who have money, um, aka your white Americans, messing with your politicians, for example,
Hmm.
the access that I guess is no longer legal.
And then I think we got to also think, who are these women in their 20s probably having relations with, right? Either
Older
some,
white men.
oh, yeah, either that or somebody their own age who's in the same, financial
Predicament.
predicament, if not
Hmm.
worse, because a lot of women in their 20s be dating bums. I mean, I don't want to like classify, but like, it's like common knowledge in girl culture. Like, you have that one relationship with somebody who you're like, why are you with him? Like, you're doing so much better than him, sis. But anyway, so like he, so a lot of times, either with somebody your own age, okay, who's in the same struggle bus as you, or somebody significantly older who might not be struggling financially, but probably has established another life himself, right? I.e., a wife, kids, a family, if not children, your age. So, like, it's really, it's like those aren't demographics of men who necessarily want to bring a child into the world necessarily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, 9 times out of 10, they're looking for a good time. So, like, they're just looking for a good time with younger women. Why would you want her not to have access to an abortion?
Yeah, beats
Right?
me.
And I'll speak from my own experience from men in general, usually they're never really approaching from the perspective of like, oh yes, responsibility, a child. They're always approaching from this let's have a good time angle most of the time, right?
Oh yeah.
Old and young and in between, all of them, no matter what age it is all have a good time, right? So like, I don't understand why they would want, specifically in that age category, women in their 20s to like not have the option to choose that, because then it's like you cut off your, potential at times of a future, right? Unless it's just some grand design to like try to keep women in their place, like young women should just be having children or something. Like that's just like rite of
passage. This is not
passage.
a Handmaid's Tale, honey. This
Exactly.
is not.
If that was the case, like I would have already been married and with like 3 kids by now. We're 25, so I would have like been had children, and like would have, and whether I wanted them or not, because there's a good chance a lot of like, especially if you're older accounts of women, a lot of them are like, I had said baby because I like was pretty much like made to get married to Earl. Earl's my favorite like old old man name. Like they were like made to get married to Earl, then they like got pregnant and were like, I would have preferred not to, but it happened and there was no recourse for me. You know what I mean? And then it limits their ability, their social mobility at that point, right? So I think I really see this whole thing as just like a power control move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really do, because I'm like, logistically, what does this do even for men who, if they desire hookup culture so much, right, and have benefited from hookup culture so much, how does this help you? It doesn't.
I think this is like a multifaceted I don't even know what to call it.
Issue.
Yeah, I think it's, but like as far as the reason why, the justification, I guess. I think there's so many like layers to it. Whether it being like stripping women of their rights. I think it's a matter of like religious versus state. I think it's also a matter of like, I don't know if this is proven, but I think it could also be a matter of making sure that we have a population to sustain America and keep the poor poor and the rich rich. Capitalism only works with the poor, middle, and upper class. And you have to have a level of working class, poor, and middle class barely making it in order to keep capitalism alive, right? So this feeds into that, because now you're going to have a mom who's forced to have a child who, it's harder to get out of poverty when you have a responsibility. And once you have your first child, I think, it's more likely that you're going to go on to have another and another kind of thing. So it's just like the statistics are not always pleasing to the eye when it comes to like childbearing. Honestly. So it's
because the statistics always put the responsibility back on the woman.
On the woman, yeah.
Solely on the woman,
Every time.
And
they never include the dad.
Never, not one time. It's even the original decision was between a woman suing the state, suing a man who really had nothing to do with, like, why was the county coroner in her business?
Exactly.
Like, or not coroner, sorry, the county, like, what is it, the attorney for the county. Like, why are you in my business? Number one. But like,
why does that concern you? Like what I
it
do with me and
doesn't.
my
It
child.
really
It
doesn't.
doesn't. You gonna take care of it? No. Like
Exactly.
what?
Like, have
Weird.
this child so that you can take care of it, so that like I feel good about
Myself. I
about
saved a
our
life. Like what?
society or something.
And
That makes
another
sense.
thing that gets me is like, though you are quote unquote allowing this fetus to live, right? No abortions are allowed now. So we're going to say hypothetically, all children are going to live. But that does not mean mom wants to take care of this child. So that child is likely going to be in poverty. That child may likely live a life of endless abuse, endless like resentment issues, endless mental health, emotional um, issues because mom and possibly dad do not want said child, cannot take care of said child, do not have the financial ability to take care of this child and or children. Then the government, will come in and save the day, put them in foster care, which is no fucking better in a lot of cases, and put them in a different home for them to collect a check, not provide sources to the parent. So it's just like an endless cycle of like, why? It just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make sense. It's pathetic. I'm just very disappointed in America, even though I'm not shocked. I'm just like, are you serious? Are you serious?
I think this was the absolute wrong step, but obviously it is being made by a certain group of people who are known to misstep.
Yeah.
Anyways. But yeah, so let's actually do a rundown of like the reasons people get abortions just for clarity, because I do think some people don't. They think it's, again, that reckless, like, oh, one night stand kind of thing. Now I need to go run out and get abortion, which is false, because 9 times out of 10, if you really have a one night stand and it's really that reckless, you get a plan B. So number one. Number two, because of an abortion is actually, to me, that's like a more long term, like something you would think about longer before you just like recklessly do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you really have to set up doctor's appointments and you have to like set up all these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway. But so the reasons people get abortions, which I don't think, this is not an exhaustive list because I'm sure there's more, but there's ectopic pregnancies, birth defects, financial readiness, not feeling prepared to financially take on a child, being prepared to raise a child independent of finances, so not even necessarily having financial issues, but not feeling emotionally prepared, not feeling like prepared as an individual, just where your life is at. Obviously, R word and incest are real. Those things happen all the time. Cannot deny that it does not happen, because a lot of people try to like deny that too, which is asinine to me.
And disgusting, because it
And
happens all the
disgusting,
time.
because it happens all the time in a lot of different ways. Yeah. And you hate to say this, but a lot of your like friends and like, homies, whatever, have either participated in this stuff, or like maybe you've had these things done to him. Like that stuff is very common, right? Anyways, so unintended pregnancies, family planning, people just deciding right now they don't want to add another child to their family, right? So that's like a couple who could have already been married and had 3 kids and we're like, we can't have a fourth, right? And then miscarriage. That's our list. Now, I'm sure there are other reasons, and we don't want to discount those reasons because they're legitimate as well. But we just want people to understand that people get abortions not only because of just, one night stands or whatever. That's what the driving narrative is. And I think that's just so false to tell people,
Yeah. I feel like they're also like, as far as the Supreme Court officials, they're only looking at it one way, in the, I was being reckless kind of way, not taking into consideration all of these other things. It's just like, I feel like it's wrong because of blah, blah, blah. Then this is what the result should be. So they're really looking at it in only one scope of, one lens, really, right?
Yeah.
Also, while excluding themselves from being accountable, aka men. So yeah,
Exactly.
very disheartening once again.
Yeah, and another thing too to keep in mind, I think, is like you have to realize they're only thinking about a family structure from one lens. They're thinking family needs to be mom, dad, mom, dad get married, then they have their child, that sort of thing, like Leave It to Beaver, the Cleavers.
The American dream kind of
The
thing.
American dream. Yeah, they're assuming that that's the one right way to have children, and therefore you shouldn't need an abortion, right? If you do it that way. But as we all know, and most of us, even the people listening, most Americans come from some sort of broken homes, some sort of arrangement, some sort of something that's not just mom, dad, and then the kids come, right? Like a lot of things happen. Divorce happens. The infidelities, affairs happen. Like we're saying, the R word and incest happens. Miscarriages can happen. All sorts of things can happen, even within a functioning marriage, that would cause somebody to need an abortion. So you can't just base this off of some idea. They're assuming so much, which is rarely ever the case. It's Leave It to Beaver is the exception in America, not the rule. You know what I mean? So
especially in today's time, like
yeah,
there is not this huge emphasis on getting married. There's just not a huge emphasis on this whole American dream. A lot of people are doing things very untraditionally, having kids first and then getting married and getting the house, or however they see fit, which is your right?
yeah.
As an individual and having the freedoms, especially in quote unquote America, right? But according to Supreme Court officials, you should not have that freedom. You should do the way they see it, and their opinion is the only opinion that you should have, essentially.
And then you get into another issue, I think, which is interesting. And actually, this is something they brought up in *Handmaid's Tale*. It's reserving sex or sexual relationships for a certain group of people, meaning that in the *Handmaid's Tale*, only really the wealthier, more noted men could have like handmaids, which meant they were able to have extramarital sex, right? To me, when you restrict access to things like an abortion, right? And then if you say, okay, well, don't have kids or don't have sex unless you're planning on having children. So then you're restricting sex to a certain socioeconomic group of men, right? Yeah. Only really, so you're stratifying sexual relationships, or at least casually, right? You're stratifying that for a certain kind of man who could afford to possibly have children in the first place, which in today's society really means you need to be making $100,000+ for the most part, especially in certain cities, to have children. So a lot of men who are effing around or sleeping around, I want to say effing around, that's crude. You would not qualify for sex, for casual sex with women. I think that would lead to a bigger issue in society, is stratifying who is allowed to basically have casual sex or not.
But I don't think that'll ever happen, because first of all, I don't think men, while they should, men are allowed to get away with murder, so they're never going to hold themselves to that level of self-control to do that. I don't think, for a majority of them, not all men. I won't speak for everyone.
I know,
but
I don't think they'll do it. I'm just saying this legislation lends itself to that idea of it's almost like alternate universe, like a possibility of something like The Handmaid's Tale, where it's only reserved for a certain socioeconomic status or a certain status of man. That's what they, and then something that they really do say all the time is don't have sex unless you are planning on having children. Okay, so then what does that tell people? That you got to be able to afford and be financially prepared, have reached a certain status to even have sex in the first place. That's what it lends itself to.
Yeah.
It gets very Handmaid's Tale to me in that respect.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So I don't think men are actually going to do that. Because dudes be literally like homeless on the street trying to hit on you, okay? Which is always wild to me. But dudes will have not even a penny to their name try to hit on you. So I don't think they'll ever stop. But again, I think men should be up in arms too, because I'm like, this is an attack on your sexual freedom too. It is.
I think the reason why it's not looked at as that is because men can absolve themselves of said fetus at any point in time.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not interested in doing this anymore, so let me just walk away. I don't have to be here anymore. Let just ghost somebody or stop answering the phone, or just really upfront about it. Whatever, however they choose to disclose, they're no longer interested in being a part of said child's life or the growing fetus. And they just walk away. I mean, they really have no baggage other than maybe the mom later on taking them to court for possibly child support or something like that. But like, sometimes it's like, is that even worth the battle? Because then
Yeah.
you invite the law to rule what's happening in your household and what you do with your child.
Mm-hmm.
So for a guy, they just walk away. It's nothing for them to walk away at that.
I know. I don't know. I mean, I try to understand the male perspective. I just can't wrap my head around a lot of it, because to me, to really understand their thoughts, I guess, on this, not that all of them think the same, but to understand kind of, I guess, the way majority of them swing, you have to like really distance yourself and be uncompassionate in a way that I just can't as a woman be. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always going to understand when somebody is making the difficult decision to have an abortion, because I guess I just see it as like that could be my body, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I can relate to it. I know what it is to have, like, for example, just like a cycle every month where I am, my body is going through the process of trying to procreate, but obviously nothing's there to procreate.
Mm-hmm.
So I relate to that. And like having to, because that is very relatable to us, because we are women, having to make the decision to have an abortion, right?
Yeah.
Um, that possibility is not far fetched, for one, on top of also being raised in a single parent household. Our mom was somewhat there in that decision, and we were the outcome of that. So we see what could happen, and I think we were on the greater end of things, but that could have easily went left.
Yep. I guess you just, when you are a woman, you just understand the real reality of this decision, and you understand that it's not something that somebody is making lightly or just flippantly making or whatever. You know what I mean? No matter how somebody comes to that decision. So I guess I just don't want to like hear male perspectives on it. I want them to, if women are going to be responsible or held responsible for this, I just feel like there should be something put in place to restrict them as much.
Agreed. 100% agree.
And to restrict their behavior totally. If you're going to restrict women totally, you really need to restrict their behavior totally too. A lot of them will be in jail. That's all I'm saying. If we were really restricting male behavior, a lot of them
Oh my goodness, God
would go.
that.
Your friends would be your friends, your brothers, your cousins, your coworkers. A lot of them would go. Because a lot of them do a lot of stuff that is sketchy or creepy or predatory, or stuff that could lend itself towards something like an unwanted pregnancy, or stuff, or if they have not already created unwanted pregnancies. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's I don't know, I'm hoping that there is some policy put in place by the actual lawmakers, like, representatives and Senate and all of that, and senators, that actually protects women's rights to have an abortion constitutionally, not just what the Supreme Court has ruled in this decision. So yeah, we'll wrap up on our discussion on Roe versus Wade. Obviously, we'll continue to stay up on the news and stay up on what is currently happening with reproductive rights in our nation, because that's something I think we definitely all should be interested in. Anybody who is of reproducing age should definitely have some sort of knowledge of where your rights stand as far as that's concerned. And yeah, we're just hoping that hopefully it can be codified into law, that women have the right to an abortion, at least for the first trimester, if not, at any point during pregnancy, for
Yeah.
whatever decision they might make, for themselves. That can become the law of the land, because it's disheartening to see that this conservative backlash is still going on, and who knows how long it's going to last.
Hopefully not long.
Hopefully, but it's
I
been
really hope not.
happening. A certain somebody's not even in the office, and like this stuff is still happening years later. So
Yeah, true. Yeah, and I think Biden, he like made an executive order
mm-hmm,
in regards to Roe versus Wade.
mm-hmm.
I really haven't like stayed up on it just because,
I'm not sure
I
that
didn't
it,
pay attention.
but I think an executive order is different than something being written into the Constitution as law. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think whatever the law still is upheld, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really. That's why I didn't really read up on it, because I was like, okay, that like, does that really do us any good? I'm not sure. I have to read up on it, and maybe we can do it like another part to this,
Yeah.
on the executive order or something like that once we like look into it. But um,
I mean, I'm sure it has some power. I'm not saying it doesn't have some power, but I don't know if he can totally like stop, like Texas or South Carolina or whoever, or
exactly.
Mississippi, from, totally banning abortions throughout the state. I don't know if it can totally do that. But
Yeah,
I
especially
think
since it's no longer a law. Like, it's up to the
the state,
governing states to decide
yeah,
what happens. So I think, like from what I understand, I want to say the state can choose to uphold or not uphold the
yeah, the
executive
state.
order.
It's
So
basically what they did when they overturned Roe versus Wade, is give the states the option to either to have the ability to totally ban abortions, or to obviously continue to recognize what was set forth in Roe versus Wade. A lot of states
mhm.
are going with continuing with Roe versus Wade because they obviously see their constituents are like outraged, I
Yeah.
think. But there are some states, i.e., like Texas, Mississippi, who were just waiting for this day and have been waiting since 1973 for this to be overturned so that they can go back to totally banning an abortion at any point during a woman's pregnancy,
Mhm.
which I think, again, is asinine, because that does nothing for their demographic, especially the lawmakers, who are the main ones with like 3 and 4 like mistresses or whatever. Like, come on. Oh, make it make sense. But yeah. So,
Strange, but yeah, no, I really do hope for some type of um first of all, changes in our justice system and our government system and our political system, because this just goes to show that there needs to be some serious reform here,
mm-hmm,
um, in my personal opinion, as well as there really needs to be a reevaluation at separating state versus religion, because those two things do not cross. Whether I'm religious or I'm not, that should not affect what said person, aka Sarah, is doing with her body and her children and all these other things, right? Um, there also needs to be some serious reform on the systems that we have in place to help moms, as far as resources as well, because those are just not in place at all, really, in America. That these days they're more inclined to take your children away and hand them to another family and provide that family resource than they are to help out the mom who's in need,
mm-hmm.
unless you fit into a certain category. So um, while I do not agree with Roe versus Wade, I do think it definitely opens the door for some major reform within a lot of different systems and resources, and looking at the laws that we need to reevaluate and or need to um, create, really. So
And just for clarification, you don't agree with Roe versus Wade being overturned.
no, I don't. I do not agree with that. I think it should be whoever's choice.
Yeah.
I'm definitely pro-choice, 110%.
Mm-hmm.
Being that I know it doesn't affect me, like that decision it should be your choice and your choice, you and whoever choice that you allow into that space.
Yeah.
Um,
I
between
think
those,
most medical professionals, from a medical standpoint, would also be pro-choice.
I'd imagine they would be pro-choice, just because how can you provide medical care not being pro-choice?
Yeah.
especially if you work on like a labor and delivery unit or like an emergency room setting where you
Hmm.
see somebody come in with a spontaneous
Yeah.
abortion. Just for
You've seen
medical
the pain
clarification,
this person is
a
in.
miscarriage, huh?
You've seen the pain this person is in.
Yeah, yeah, and you can also see like the physical manifestations because like when you don't get rid of that body, your body ends up like you can get an infection, you can like become septic. Like it's an actual like issue. It's not something that you play around with. You can lose your life behind that if you just let the baby sit in there because before the baby even gets to the point of having a miscarriage, aka a spontaneous abortion,
Hmm.
um, it's technically like a parasite at mom. It's just like eating, like taking all your resources to provide to said child, right?
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes the body just is like, no, this is not it, or like detect something is wrong, and so you have a spontaneous abortion. But that has to leave the body. If it does not leave the body on its own, it has to be removed, or you can die. Imagine having something living or what was living just sitting up there.
Hmm.
Like, it's going to rot. It's going to become infected.
They can't
It's going to
imagine it
affect
'cause
other body systems.
they can't imagine it because it is never going to happen to them. So they
Oh,
just
I get it. Yeah,
totally exist in like a delusion as far as like medical, science is concerned here,
I
or
see.
like a women's reproductive systems are concerned. They just exist in a delusion.
Oh, for sure. And I think beyond a delusion, it's really out of ignorance and choosing to be
Willful
ignorant because
ignorance.
education is readily available. It's
Yeah,
readily available. So it's not
I'm
that
sure
you can't become educated.
exactly. I'm sure any medical professional would gladly tell you what the reality of it is.
For sure. For sure.
So
And it's not hard to find this information, period.
no, it's
You can do a
not.
simple search on like Google Scholar, which is they have a bunch of scientific research
They
from
just
a bunch
don't.
of medical professionals. It's right there. You know what I mean? A simple Google search, you can use
Yeah,
Bing if you're not savvy on Google, like anything, Internet Explorer. It's there. So there really is no excuse.
agreed. They don't care. They just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
And
come to
like
that conclusion.
they exist in a power structure which allows them not to care.
Yeah.
Basically,
Exactly.
that's like
Yeah.
I what you got to realize about like oppressors is like you can't count on them to have a conscience. Unfortunately, like you can't count on them to like have compassion and concern. Actually, for like your not saying that they don't always have it, but by and large, they have no interest in having compassion for somebody else because that would take their power away.
Which is always so weird to me because, like, isn't that kind of like your job? Like, you're representing for Supreme Court
Yeah,
justices specifically.
they're
That is your
representing
job.
America. It's their
Yeah.
job to be as absolutely like they should be cover all bases, all types of Americans. It's their job to
Hmm.
be totally non-biased, totally uh, not only interested in certain groups. Like
Yep.
that's their job. Actually, that's why they're put on the bench. But
It's me.
obviously not. Obviously not. Anyway, I think that was a great discussion on Roe versus Wade. I'm glad we were able to talk about it, especially coming off the heels of such a frustrating and infuriating decision being made by the Supreme Court. Like we said, it just feels like we're stepping back into some archaic time, like continuing to take steps back into archaic times. Um, and then even hearing what they were saying about trying to overturn like Plessy versus Ferguson, just real basic like civil rights, like just trying to get rid of civil rights. Like, Lord, what are these
Seriously.
people trying to do? Like,
Clarence Thompson, especially, is a real disappointment in this.
yeah,
Like, he's just like,
he gotta
are you
go.
black? Well, like, what are you at this point? It seems like you're a sellout.
It kills me. I'm like, Anita Hill was really on something in the '90s because, or she was. Well, first off, we believe her because like all
As we
women
always did.
experience like some crap like that from some dude, right? Okay, a lot of us have. D pics, yeah, harassment. Anyways, so like she's been told us about this person's character, and obviously, again, patriarchy wins. His maleness won because they didn't want to hear what a woman had to say about his behavior. And this is what we get.
Yeah,
Getting
we're
very
gonna do a
much.
whole another episode on him because he has truly benefited uh from his from male privilege, for example, and being in spaces where he quote unquote shouldn't have not been, right? But he's trying to overturn the very things that has provided him the success that he has been able to access. So, or the access to the success that he has now, right? So, it's like, bro, did you forget where you came from? Like, did you fall and bump your head or something? Which is brings me back to my point that I said in the very beginning. You are making decisions for things that you're not going to be around to see, buddy.
Exactly.
Like, please stop. Please stop.
Please stop.
Please.
I also think, I know they appoint Supreme Court justices for life. I think, honestly, I know that's a tradition, but I think same way that I don't think there should be term limits for politicians, I sort of think they shouldn't be having 80 and 90-year-olds up there, because you
Yeah.
can't tell me some of them aren't like half senile.
For one, and for two, how are your opinions and your rulings going to be relevant? Like, you're planning for 1469 when you were alive, and that is no longer relevant. You can't even tell me who is relevant today in our society to make a decision for, let alone make the decision. Like, it's odd to me. But yeah, that's a whole other topic. I digress.
Yeah. But yeah, that was our discussion on Roe versus Wade. Obviously, like we were saying, it's so layered, so you can really get into a million one different little tangents. But that was our discussion on Roe versus Wade. We will obviously continue to follow this as it progresses, and hopefully progresses, not regresses, like we were saying. Yeah, any last words, Keelan? Anything else you want to say before we head out?
No,
It's an infuriating topic. It's frustrating.
It is. It is, yeah. It's very disheartening too, especially living in America, because it's like, we're quote unquote the land of the free. And I'm not, as a woman, I'm not feeling very free, so, let alone like taking away your
It makes
rights
you.
to
It
bodily
makes
autonomy.
exactly. It really makes you like, I don't even really want to be in relationships with someone who could impregnate me, because, like, where's, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going in the event that would happen, like, I'm not going to be able to handle things for myself. I'm not going to be able to have the right to have that choice. So it makes me like,
same sex, like, it doesn't matter. I think, like, because you at some point you take that risk, like if something happens medically, right? I don't even have the resources to be like, oh, I can go, get help from a medical professional. They're just as stuck and lost as you are.
Yeah.
So that's not a guarantee. And you have to go to, the doctor, I guess, has to go to, I want to say like court or whatever, and prove your case or whatever, and why you need an abortion and whether or not they can perform it. That's blasphemy. Nobody got time for that. That's a matter of life and death.
A violation too.
Yeah, it's a matter of life and death. That has nothing to do with like nothing. Like,
the judge's decision.
Facts.
Yeah, I agree. It makes you. I mean, I think definitely. You guys know I don't really. Well, I don't date right now, and it's because I just ain't no good men out here. You know what I'm saying? But
except for Ocean.
except for Ocean. But
no, he's a dog too.
Yeah, he'll dog you out. But so but even thinking about like the possibility of getting into it, I immediately just stop. I'm like, nope, because I'm not taking that risk. I'm not taking that risk at this point in my life. No. And I fit right into that demographic of the type of the average age of women who would have an abortion. No. Not doing it. I'm just not gonna take that risk. Like, so sorry, fellas. Missing out on a good one. You can thank Clarence Thomas for that.
That's funny. Anyways, guys, we do appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned, because I'm sure we'll probably hit on this topic again at some point, especially with an update on possibly the executive order and if any other legislation comes into play. So yeah, thank you for watching. I know we did a bit of a tangent at the end, but this topic right here really gets your girl fired up. So
Mm-hmm.
We hope you enjoyed, and we hope that this was also educational.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's important to maintain educating people on this,
Know the
so that we
facts.
can hopefully get this overruled again.
Mm-hmm. Or get a constitutional law protecting people's right to an abortion.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye, guys.